What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me for another video. Where today, I want to talk a little bit about our quarterback, some more about him. He recently did a podcast interview with Jeff Teague and some other guys. Not sure who the other guys are, but it's the 520 podcast. I saw it on YouTube and listened to it on YouTube. It's about 42 minutes or so, 41, 42 minutes. And had some good information. If you want to hear, everything that was in it, of course, after this, go check that out. But just getting some tidbits, learning a little bit about AR, how his mind works, how he thinks. Super chill guy. Seems like a guy that, generally, doesn't have a whole lot to say. And he's kind of talked about that publicly before about how he's a chill individual, doesn't say a whole lot, but, when he's on the football field because he's quarterback, he has to lead those guys and he has to, talk up. He has to be the guy that's saying what people need to do and putting people where they need to go. And he understands his role. So from that aspect, you love to hear that, right? And he talked about at one point what it's like trying to lead guys that have been veterans in the NFL, right? In the league for a long time, have a wife and kids and family, playing for second and third contracts, those kinds of guys, and what it's like having to come in as a 20-year-old and be a leader for those guys. And I have that clip here for you. So we're going to listen to this and then we'll continue talking about it.
I know my position. I know everybody going to have eyes on me and they want to listen to me. But I was a rookie. I'm young. I was 20 years old. So it's like, you got to sit back and learn sometimes. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was really doing, just sitting back, you know what I'm saying, talking to Z, talking to Speed, talking to Buck, you know what I'm saying, talking to the vet guys that have been here, done it already.
Yeah. All right, so right there, you're hearing who he's kind of dependent on in terms of leadership, and it's kind of who you would expect on the team, right? Guys like EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin, DeForest Buckner, those are guys that he's leaned on and that he leaned on as a rookie, as leaders, guys that really brought him in to show him kind of what the NFL is about and how to go about business in the NFL. And I think those are good guys. Like those guys are dogs, like absolute dogs, some of the toughest guys on the team, play through anything, some of the best players on the team. So I think it's good that those are the guys that took AR under his wing and it really started to show him how to be a pro. And now coming into the second year, like you mentioned, like coming into his second season, he's just more comfortable. The guys are more comfortable with him. It's easier for him to be a leader, knowing what the goal is at hand, knowing what his position is, and being the quarterback. So coming into it, feel really confident with AR and what he's able to do. Now, of course, there's always going to be people that talk about the injuries, and he mentioned that, and he talked about the injuries in college and how they mounted up, right? Talked about his freshman year of college, redshirted, only played 4 games in his freshman year of college, and then his second season, he didn't get a whole lot of playing time, but even still, he ended up, having some hamstring injuries during the competition. He had never had hamstring injuries, and both his hamstrings were bothering him. So he ends up losing the quarterback competition. But later on in the season, the other quarterback for Florida, they end up getting hurt. Richardson goes in against Georgia, comes out with a concussion. So he has the concussion in college. And then that offseason ends up having to have knee surgery. So that second year of college, tumultuous for him. Then going into his junior year, obviously not completely clean, but for the most part, able to play through that season, and then leaves Florida after that. He said that he knew he wasn't going to be at Florida past his junior year one way or another, ends up going to the NFL, ends up on the Colts, and he thought he was going number one. When they started talking about the draft, he thought he was going number one. His agent was talking about going number one, but then, the day the draft got there, he realized, he never really talked to the Panthers a whole lot, didn't have a whole lot of communication with the Panthers, so he knew he wasn't going number one. But he did have a story about how he kind of felt like he was going to Indy the day of the draft, while all the different players were there at the draft and being drafted, and what happened for him to kind of have his sign as to how he knew he was going to end up in Indy. So I'll play this clip for you, and then we'll come back to it.
They had a little hatch set up or whatever. And then one of the running backs had them like messed up one of the hats. It was Bijan. Messed up one of the hats.
John Robinson.
It was an Indy hat. My mom went over there to take pictures with the other QB moms, and she fixed the hat. I'm sitting there watching her, and she's fixing the hat. So I'm like, man, that's not right. And she was the only person that seen the hat that was messed up. She the one when I fixed it. I'm like, all right, I might mess around and do end up in Indy for real.
Okay, so that right there, like if you're somebody that believes everything happens for a reason and along those lines, then you'll believe in that, right? And so he knew he was going to be in Indy. I feel like for a long time, people knew he was going to be in Indy. He even said during the podcast, like before he ever even said that he was going to leave college and go to the NFL, before he ever declared for the NFL draft, there were people talking about him being a fit for Indy and going into Indy, and that's likely because Shane Steichen got hired, so people were talking about it just be the perfect fit and the right. This is the perfect offense for Anthony Richardson. Is the perfect place for him to be. Now, there was also some talk later in the podcast where he was talking about his first impressions at Indy, and being drafted and like what he thought of it. Like this doesn't seem like a guy who, if he would have went somewhere else, probably would have been happier. Right, a place like Houston, which is kind of popping instead of a place like Indy where you have the inner city, which isn't the greatest place, but then everything outside of Indy, a lot of cornfields and not a whole lot of stuff going on. So, a guy like Anthony Richardson coming from Florida and coming from the part of Florida, he comes from just a different way of life. It gets cold up there, and he mentioned how his first winter wasn't great. He doesn't like being cold like that. So, you know, hopefully he wants to stick around. Hopefully we can pay him enough in the future, keep him around, instead of him wanting to go somewhere where it's going to be warm. So, hopefully we're able to keep him around. But I saw again a good interview from Anthony Richardson, talking about his first game also and how pumped he was for that and how like after the first game was over, how he knew he could come in and do this. And we saw that like when we talked about that when we brought up Anthony Richardson's tape last week about how between game one and game two, just the first drive of the first game and the first drive of the second game, you could see more of a comfortability with Anthony Richardson operating the offense. Even though he didn't finish that second game, you did see more comfortability and even more comfortability once he got to week 4 and week 5. So coming into year two, expect a lot from Anthony Richardson. Expect him to be great. We talked a lot about Anthony Richardson this week, and that's the guy, right? Been looking for any information. He finally does a podcast interview, and honestly, didn't say a whole lot. Again, not a guy that talks a whole lot. A man of few words. But again, about a 42-minute interview. If you want, go check that out. It's the 520 podcast. Again, Jeff Teague, Indy legend in basketball, and a couple other guys. Good conversation. Again, Anthony Richardson. It's on YouTube is where I found it. So go check that out. I appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you get notified anytime any more content comes out on this channel. Again, appreciate you stopping by for another video. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.